All right, Four Boys Garage back here again, and we're going to do a little more in-depth video on the repair that we figured out and the real problem with these LG refrigerators. It's not always the compressor. There's some issues with some of the internal components, but we discovered kind of what was going on, and we made our previous video, which didn't cover in great detail, so we're going to try to do better this time. All right, first thing you're going to want to do is on your refrigerator, you can get in here and find your tag, which lists a lot of good information. It shows the refrigerant, it shows the amperage of your compressor, and it also shows the total charge. This one's 5.11 ounce, and that is the total charge, and literally has to be weighed in with a scale to be accurate, as well as other stuff like manufacture date. This was, looks like September of 2014. So a lot of good info here, and you'll need this first. Also like to say, there's a lot here, and I'm sure we could be more in depth on some things, and we'll probably miss some others, but we're gonna do our best to cover most of the general steps to diagnose and potentially repair one of these refrigerators yourself. There's a lot of easy fixes and small things that can go wrong on these refrigerators, quite a bit more complex than they used to be. This is the basic tool set to do some initial troubleshooting and should cover most of the simple issues. Screwdriver or some type of a screw gun. Multimeter is helpful. This is sort of the run-of-the-mill multimeter. This is even more helpful. This has a clamp ring to test for amperage, which you will see later is an important part. Non-contact thermometer is very helpful, probably the most accurate thing to do, but I bought this specifically for this project when I was working on this, and it's also capable of taking temperature. There's Fahrenheit, Celsius, and then here's the probe. One of the first things that I noticed when we had this issue was that we lost ice in the door, and for a few days I thought it was because everyone had used it. Turns out it's not. So one of the easiest tests to do is this door switch. This ice maker on the door works by air that's been brought from the freezer to the refrigerator. So the air gets pumped from the freezer into the ice maker and then returned back through these lines, and the easiest thing to do is go ahead and push this door switch, and you just need to wait a few seconds. You should hear that kick back on, and there it's back on. So of course mine is working. My fridge is functioning normally now, but that's probably the first thing to test for, to make sure that it's not just that little fan motor. So that passes that test. The next thing I noticed was in the freezer, the ice cream was soft. It wasn't firm anymore. We did have ice in this lower ice maker, and things were generally still frozen, but they weren't as hard, especially the ice cream was noticeable. You could scoop it super easily. It was weird. You can see right now, this is an important part of your LG refrigerator ownership toolkit. This is a little below 0, and it's important because this does not reflect the actual temperature in either your refrigerator or your freezer. This only shows you what your set point is. And when your fridge is failing, these will still read the same, even though it could be room temperature inside your refrigerator. An important thing to note is that once we made this repair, this fridge since then has been running for 2 years now flawlessly. So it definitely was worth the effort. I don't trust the new stuff any more than this one. So I'm glad I made this repair, and really glad that I don't have the new refrigerant in a lot of the newer units. So after confirming that your door ice fan works properly and confirming that your ice cream is fine, you could have an issue with one of the thermostats, which is up there underneath that little pod. That could be bad. There's also one behind that panel back there, which is really easy to remove and replace. My first call to a service tech told me that the lower the freezer temperature sensor was bad and he needed $500 to fix it. He didn't know I'd already been online. The part was like $14. I did it myself by removing this door, which is super easy. A couple screws on the sides. In about 30 minutes, for a $14 part and saved myself $500, which I'm really glad because that didn't do a single thing. So I also tested the upper sensor, and it's super easy to access as well. Certainly, once your refrigerator is not functioning and you don't have food in it, it makes it way easier to work on. But I tested that one and ruled it out as an issue. It was fine also, even though I had already bought one. It was like $10. Just want to have it in hand because once I had it apart, clearly it would be easier to replace it if it was bad. The resistance on those things varies based on the temperature they're getting, but if you put your multimeter into resistance testing, it should show that you were getting some reading. I want to say that I was getting like 10 ohms or something. And of course, it makes a difference depending on the temperature you have. So if you get a reading at all, you're probably fine. For most people, you'll either find that you have a sealed system and compressor problem, which these things have been notorious for failing, or you have one of these other, almost arbitrary issues that are just super easy to fix and the parts are super cheap. And there's a lot of other links to videos, and we'll put some in our description to some of those things, and a little bit more in depth on troubleshooting and test mode that you can put these in. And the test mode will turn on certain fans and things that you can look for to see if they are functioning. This is the access panel that covers the test button and the PCB. And I know there are some issues with the PCBs and stuff like that, but if you want to put it in test mode, you actually need to pop that cover off, just a few screws and the buttons in there. Here's the old PCB board. We don't have the fridge out, but still trying to get the info we need to show where the test button is. There it is right there, right there. So you're gonna wanna push that only if you're wanting to go into test mode. You can test a few things. It really has just, if you push it the first time, it turns on the compressor and you should be able to feel it, and you should be able to also test it if you're doing electrical tests. That's a great way to get it to run full bore, is you want to do this after having unplugged the refrigerator. So when you go into test mode, it should turn on the compressor at full bore, and that's a great way to test its amperage draw and really know if it's pulling enough amperage and compressing. If it's not compressing, it won't be pulling much amperage. You press that test button again, you will get that first stage there also tests your fans. So you can see that your fans are running, your evaporator fan, your condenser fan, which is below the unit, but you can open the refrigerator and freezer area to also see if those fans are operating, if you have air moving through the vents. When you push the test button the second time, you'll just get the condenser fan and compressor should keep running, but that varies by model. And really, it can isolate which compartment you're having troubles with depending on your model, but it's really not all that helpful. You hit the button again the third time, it'll turn off the compressor and fans and activate the defrost. But there's a defrost sensor on there. If your unit's already warm, it might not really do anything because the sensor will stop it. But you press it a fourth time, you're just back to normal operation, or you could just unplug the fridge. But this is a great way to get started on, the initial testing. There is also, for your sensors, your thermistor or the temp sensor in your fresh food and freezer areas is contained in this plug, and I don't know if this will stay focused. It's very small, but you can see that R, SNR, F, SNR, that's going to be your refrigerator and freezer sensor. Those pins correspond, and if you have paper clips, you can jam into the plug when it's actually plugged in. You can make contact. You can actually test those sensors from this location without having to take anything apart, which is really helpful. This board was perfectly fine. There was nothing wrong with my refrigerator. This was just part of LG and service techs wanting to just throw parts at it. And so the new compressor came with a new control board, and this thing still works, so I kept it, as did the old compressor. I kept it too because it was fine.